Hi guys, Jonathan Graham here for Thinking About Guitar. It's Thinking About Guitar's first NAMM. It's not my first NAMM, and the reason that I mention that is it's not truly NAMM without a meeting with the great Andy Powers and inspirational Andy Powers. Now, how are you this year, sir?
You know, I'm holding up okay. Glad to see you.
You too. Now, it's always great to be chatting with you and seeing all the new stuff from Taylor. Can you talk us through a little bit about what you've got in your hands there?
Yeah, this is a new guitar for this that we're introducing here at the show. It's a 710 gold label model. Now, this time last year, we introduced the first in our what became a gold label collection. We introduced the 814E model. Now, that's a common model name, but for us, it was a new shape, new style, new sound, really everything about the guitar. Everything material that I could think of. A new neck design, a new brace voicing, a new look, even a new logo, a new peg head. And over the course of this year, we've introduced a number of new instruments within that collection. Because as a guitar maker, one of the things I love is creating different kinds of sounds.
Sure.
Right? So over the course of 2025, we introduced our deep body Grand Pacific guitars. Now here at the show, we started bringing back our classic square shoulder. I mean, there's no squares or straight lines on it, but a square shoulder classic dreadnought silhouette. This is a perfect place for a guitar sound like this to exist in our world, where we have a real traditional, familiar kind of voice that's incredibly powerful, really strong. And now the design itself is different than dreadnoughts that we've built in the past, where the body is more of a traditional dreadnought depth. We have this new action control neck design. It's been voiced with our fan V-Class to create an incredibly robust sort of response out of the guitar. It has a great deal of balance, great sustain over the whole register, but it is like a more time-honed kind of sound. It's familiar, but like very fundamental forward at the same time. It's a guitar sound that, it's like it took its vitamins or something, It's got some muscles behind it.
Absolutely. But with the gold label series, I mean, it's obviously done so incredibly well, and now fantastic new addition to it. Just talking on those particular voices that are inbuilt with the instrument. Could you give us some examples of where you're seeing that? Are there particular vowel sounds that you're trying to tune to? Is there certain resonances?
That's a really good, really interesting that you phrase it that way. Because if you were to go all the way back to, say, Hermann Helmholtz's work and describing tones by focusing on vowel sounds and the harmonic content that would create, an O sound versus an ah sound. This one is very, very strong in those low order fundamentals and partials. So, right now I'm plugged in with this guitar we're fitting with a Baggs pickup system, but it has this incredibly powerful sort of broad, it would be like a deep O, long O sound, and yet it doesn't have like the woofy kind of cloudy sound that a lot of large body guitars can get, especially right through that F sharp G, G sharp A, right around.
And that's a specific consideration in the design process?
Absolutely.
Oh, okay.
Absolutely.
I mean, I wouldn't imagine anything is left to chance with yourself, but I don't know how detailed you can get with it, so it's incredible to hear.
Every piece of wood is unique. And so there are some variations to go, man, this top sounds like that, this back sounds like that. But when I try to design an instrument that's going to take into account a lot of different pieces of wood and be potentially a lot of guitars, I want to design it so that no matter what the wood comes in, it's going to fall in this range and they're all going to be good. I don't want there to be any like a weak guitar in the lot.
Absolutely.
You don't want to leave much up to chance. You want it to be on purpose, built well, so that you always have a good result.
Where do you stand with the torrefaction process type of thing that's very, very popular within guitar building?
It's become very popular. Now, I actually like it. There are different recipes. There's a lot of different ways to bake cookies, right? And so you can do torrefaction in a zero oxygen environment. That's, a lot of people would say, well, that's true torrefaction because you're eliminating some of the oxidation that happens by doing it in either a nitrogen flushed environment, a superheated steam environment, a vacuum environment. And that imparts one characteristic to the piece of wood. the recipes that we use, we actually do in-house. I like the oxidizing reaction because it more, in my view, it more closely resembles what happens to a piece of wood naturally. And so this top, well, this one's a torrefied top on all of these models. We're using it quite often because I love the dimensional stability, I love the color, and I like the sonic characteristics that I get out of a top that's been prepared in this way. Even what we've used as, call it natural spruce, or some people might describe it as raw spruce, really for almost 30 years now, we've been using an oven, a dry heat environment to prepare our wood because we like the dimensional stability that we get. And so for every component of the guitar, you know, you've got a separate recipe, kind of a schedule of how do you prepare this material to fit this part so that it remains stable in service of the musician.
Yeah, of course, of course. Just one more point on that, because, you know, it's how far do you want to take it? You know, that way, is a guitar broken in after 2 years? Is it 9 years? Like, is it as specific as that when you guys are going through that process? You're sort of thinking, I think the sort of golden time for a guitar is peak years are this to this, or is it not quite as you know, crazy as that?
What I don't want is to go overboard.
Okay.
Right, because I would love the fact that when you have a guitar and the musician grows with that guitar, the guitar gets better with age. It continues to ripen. You know, it's like one of my hobbies, I like growing fruit trees. You know, so you can watch oranges or peaches develop or apples develop on the thing, and you go, this one is almost ready, getting better and better and better. You go, right there, that's perfect. Except that window of time, let's say for a piece of fruit, it might be only a few days, but for a guitar, I don't really know where the far end of it is. I know when I've worked on some very, very old instruments to go, there's almost nothing left here. It's like, I can't hardly even work on this to repair it because it's about to turn back into sawdust.
So if you visit Norman's, you pick up a couple of those that are in there, just, you know other brands from, it'll be amazing, there'll be one day there'll be 100-year-old Taylor.
And so I like that notion, but I don't want to go so far as to say, well, it has to go to this year and that's when it can be a good guitar. Like, I like that the guitar grows with the player. You do realize though, if you said, 16 years, you know how many searches on eBay and Reverb there'd be 16 years ago. That's a fun thought, but I don't think that it actually works that way, because part of what I've witnessed with guitars is that the guitars start to develop better with different styles of playing. So like if you play a guitar real forcefully, you know, heavy hand, somebody's using it as a hard hitting rhythm instrument for 10 years. After 10 years, that guitar, you come back and you listen to it and you go, that one sounds very different than a guitar that was played with a fingerstyle player for the same amount of time. It's not better, they're just very different. It's like they become more well suited for the player that's been using it all that time. Like I've actually done that as an experiment to go, I've built almost identical guitars and had one go to, you know, a fingerstyle kind of jazz-oriented player, and one go to a bluegrass player, come back in 10 years after a lot of serious playtime, you go, well, that one responds incredibly well to a very delicate touch. But if I play it forcefully, it starts to like give up real quick. Absolutely. That one, man, I gotta work to get something out of it, but if I start hitting it hard, it was like no end to the headroom. I want the instrument to continue developing and growing with the player. Of course. Now something as well in growing and developing is the Taylor brand itself. Now, as humans get into their 40s and 50s, there's big changes and, you know, looking back on the past, looking to the future. Yeah, my forehead grows, you know. There's a lot of new wisdom. How is it for Taylor? You've just celebrated some big anniversaries. Yeah, we had our 50th anniversary just a short amount of time ago. And you know, it's an exciting time to be part of Taylor as we continue to grow into our future. With some of the new developments that we're bringing in, it feels like a breath of fresh air in the room. So we've got more opportunity than ever to explore new creative directions. We can create different kinds of sounds. We're building our most consistent guitars ever. We've got a lot more opportunities and types of music being played. And so we continue to expand so that we can, make the instruments that people want to be using. Like in the last year, we've been introducing a new collection called our Somos Collection, where we're building bajo quintos and doce dobles to fit, different styles of music that we've never really even considered, in past eras. Those kinds of things make me really excited, both as a musician and as a builder. To say, there's all kinds of creative players out there making really cool music. I want to build instruments that suit their needs so that they can be inspired.
And you're totally doing that now. You've got one of the Gold Label series here.
Yeah.
Got another guitar that's just sitting next to you. Could you talk us through that one as well, please?
Absolutely. So this guitar, this is a classic Taylor. This is an 814 CE. It's a totally new model for this year. And I've appointed it so that it looks exactly like the old model.
Wow.
On purpose. Same East Indian rosewoods on the back and side. Sitka spruce top. You can't see anything that's different. Other than the sharp-eyed Taylor aficionados, they'll notice that the controls are gone from the upper ballot.
Okay.
We're using some sound hole mounted controls because in this guitar, almost everything of significance is new. We have a new pickup system. This is the Claria pickup that we've been working on developing initially for real big stages. And big artists on big stages. We realized a lot of those same characteristics, those are the same scenarios that regular players, we face those. You walk into a club date and you might not get a sound check. You might have only a line check. You don't necessarily have the ability to adapt the environment to the sound of the pickup. And I love the way our ES2 pickup system works, but it was designed to mimic almost like a microphonic studio environment.
Interesting.
That's not the noisy bar that we might go and play in. We need something that we can plug in real quick, dial in great tones, have a musically pleasing sound, go, all right, let's go make some music. And so that's one of the hallmarks of this design, is that it's a very inconspicuous pickup system, but it's ultra intuitive to use. There's a volume control and 2 tone shaping controls. They're not traditional bass and treble kinds of things, but it really is like a characteristic shape. So if you need a bright, like presence forward strumming sound, you can dial that in very quickly, very easily. If you want a more natural finger style sound, just roll the dials to where you like it and away you go.
Absolutely. Can we hear it a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. It's got good dynamic range, good balance. If I start moving these around, if I want a far more natural sound, I can get that very quickly. If I go the other way, and I want a bright strumming sound, like to cut through a dense mix, it really becomes that simple. The next part of this guitar is that these guitars are now fitted with our action control neck system. So within seconds, I can adjust the string height to exactly where I want it. For us as guitar makers, it feels like a seismic shift. Go, you mean
it's not a drama every time?
Yeah, it's not even a repair procedure now. It literally takes like a few seconds. You don't even have to retune the guitar, and you have it set up exactly how you want it. With that system comes a different bracing voicing. So this is a V-Class guitar, but now done as a Scalloped V-Class. So I end up with a significant amount more low-end resonance. So if I'm strumming open position chords, it's got a lot more, like the note blending effect that you would get. So you don't hear so much note separation in the low register. I have the volume, the pitch accuracy, and the balance of a V-Class instrument. That chime and the fidelity all the way up the fretboard, but with a little more like the familiar acoustic guitar strumming rhythm sound.
I mean, I think it is. It's a very underrated aspect of it. I think a lot of people don't pick up on is that you can continue to add little bits and pieces in terms of the development of the guitar to add all these extra overtones and sounds and frequencies, but it can at some point create this sort of cluster of sound that can be unappealing, especially if you are just liking to sort of strum the guitar and bash it. There's got to be that meat. I suppose there's room for that type of guitar if there's a particular type of thing you want to be doing, but if you're looking for something that's all round, there's got to be that midway point.
Yeah, and so as a builder, it's been exciting over the last year, particularly, to continue expanding our collections of guitars, because now we have our Builder's Edition collection guitars. They are some of the most cutting edge, like state-of-the-art, modern, ultra high fidelity, ultra ergonomic, like it's like the state-of-the-art of acoustic guitar making. And so if that's the kind of instrument that you're most comfortable with, they're brilliant. They're absolutely brilliant. I mean, you're going to get all the way to the end of the fretboard and still get your thumb around the neck, just so cool. And so we have an instrument like that now with the action control neck and the Scalloped V-Class voicing, the Claria pickup system. We have our standard collections that, I mean, this is an iconic Taylor model, an 814 CE. It looks like the guitar that we know and love, but yet it's developed to a point where this is the most refined form of this instrument we've ever made. By contrast, we have something like our Gold Label collection guitars that are a new aesthetic, a new sound, a new feel for someone who wants a far more traditional, more familiar acoustic guitar. And so when we can expand like this, you go, man, this is great, because so many artists are looking for something different and unique, something that fits their playing, their music, their musical environment, their ears. I love to be able to deliver those instruments.
Now, you've had so much innovation in all aspects of acoustic guitar building, of course. Something that you've focused on hugely is the actual process, the finishing process, and the materials that you're using to finish it. Can you talk a little bit about, over the years, how that has evolved and developed? And was there any points where you felt there was a misstep and you needed to sort of backtrack and go in a different direction with it?
I don't know that we've gone so far as to say, yeah, that's a wrong step to take, but we certainly learn from the guitars that we make. And so if you were to look at the kind of the history of guitar finishing, it very closely mirrors other wood finishing technologies. So, you might go 100 years ago and say, well, we were finishing with shellac, and then the development of artificial resins. So nitrocellulose lacquer as an example. Okay, well, that was a big improvement over natural material based varnishes like shellac. So in the early days of Taylor, that was still in the era of lacquer. It's got a sound, it's got a feel, it was easy to work with, and it continues to shrink and becomes a very thin layer. It's not particularly stable, definitely not good for the environment or your health. And so when we started working through our UV cured resins, well, that was a big step forward, because you could create a very durable, protective, and controllable finish thickness. We took those to a level where they're incredibly thin, sometimes thinner than a traditional lacquer finish. And that's worked out really well. A lot of that technology is coming out of the automotive field, where material coatings are, that's big business. As guitar makers, we get to kind of glean a little bit of extra from some of the larger industries. And so we continue to use finishes like that. We're also continuing to explore water-based finishes. So we're using some water-based varnish style finishes on a couple of our guitars that we're building in Tecate, like the GS Mini, for example. Very durable, very protective, ultra thin, super low damping factor. So there's a lot of different ways that we'll continue to look at how we're making that work, because it's really, it's like one ingredient in the recipe of your guitar making. You got to build the guitar, but you need to count for how thick is the finish, how dense is the finish, what's the damping factor of it, what best suits the recipe.
Something else that was a challenge, but for you guys you've really thrived in looking at different woods, is the availabilities of certain woods, traditional woods for making certain guitars. Obviously, the environment is a huge aspect of sort of Taylor's ecosystem. It's very, very important. How did that problem of not being able to source certain woods turn into an advantage for Taylor?
I wouldn't say that it's a problem, because most of the woods that we think of as traditional at this point, East Indian rosewood, it's available. Sitka spruce, it's available. But the way and grades and quality and scale of availability is changing. And so it's not a single problem that will ever be solved. It's more of a direction that you go. And so you want to be working with what our forest will give us at the same time that we're looking at, replanting for future generations of instruments. It's like there was a day when humankind, existed as hunter-gatherers. You go off into the forest or into the jungle, you find something and you take it, and that's what you're going to use. But there's a day when you have to stop doing that and you become a farmer, where you deliberately plant things and harvest for your intended purpose. And that's the state that we find ourselves in as guitar makers. So certainly we like using traditional East Indian rosewood or old Sitka spruce, but we're also using more pieces that are coming from either small trees. We work ahead to work with the size of those materials optimally. So you'll see multi-piece tops or backs go, well, if you do your woodworking right, they function perfectly well and they can look fantastic. It's not a problem, but in a traditional sense, that would have been significantly more work. So if the tree was large, well, I don't want to cut 4 or 5 joints in a guitar top when I could do 1. That's more work. I don't want to do that extra work. And so there's a lot of things like that. We go, well, we have to adapt with the environment, as well as adapt to use other materials.
For sure. No, look, thanks so much again, Andy, for taking the time for us today. Would you mind playing us out?
Sure, absolutely.
Beautiful. Thanks so much,
Hey,
Andy.
thanks.
I appreciate it, as
Great
usual.
to see you.